You ever feel like you're just a background character in someone else's show? That's exactly how I felt on a Friday night 6 months ago. Haley had dragged me to this rooftop party with our friends, and I use the term loosely because half the people there were just familiar faces I couldn't even name. It was the kind of crowd where everyone knows someone but nobody really knows anyone. A mix of co-workers, old classmates, and the random plus ones that somehow become regulars. Take Sean, for example. He'd only been part of this group for about 6 months. Nobody even seemed to know where he came from. One day he just started showing up. Sean had this way of always being in the middle of things, cracking jokes that weren't funny but somehow still getting laughs. Haley thought he was hilarious. Me? I thought he was an attention-seeking clown. Anyway, Haley had her social butterfly game on lock that night, like always. She floated from group to group, laughing loudly, flipping her hair, and flashing that megawatt smile she saved for everyone but me. I stayed in the background, sipping my whiskey and pretending to enjoy myself while she basked in the spotlight. I might have let it slide, maybe chalked it up to Haley just being Haley, but then I noticed her phone. It was sitting on the table, buzzing like crazy. She'd glance at it, smile this sly little smile, then flip it face down. "Who's texting you so much?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "Work," she replied without even looking at me. "Work? At this hour?" She finally glanced up, her face already wearing that exasperated expression she saves just for me. "Not everyone clocks out at 5, Dylan." I bit my tongue and let it go, but my gut was twisting. Then it happened. The moment that would replay in my head over and over. Haley stood up, glass in hand, and tapped her fork against it. The room quieted, all eyes on her. She loved that, being the center of attention. "To my husband Dylan," she began, smiling sweetly at me. For a second I thought, maybe she's about to say something nice for once. Wrong. "Dylan," she continued, "the man who's reliable, dependable, and always consistent, like a Honda Civic. Not exactly exciting, but hey, it'll get you where you need to go." Laughter rippled through the room. I felt my face heat up. "And," she added, her smile widening into something razor-sharp, "let's not forget his fascinating ability to turn any conversation into a lecture about tax deductions. Truly a man of many spreadsheet talents." The laughter got louder, and Haley sat down, looking way too pleased with herself. Sean, of course, was laughing the hardest, slapping the table like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He leaned over to me, still chuckling, and said, "Man, she's got you pegged, huh? Gotta love her sense of humor." I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Leaning toward Haley, I hissed, "What the hell was that?" "It was a joke," she said, casually swirling her wine. "Relax." "Publicly humiliating me is your idea of a joke?" "God, Dylan, stop being so sensitive," she snapped, finally looking at me. "It's not that deep." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up, her thumbs flying across the screen. That same smug smile crept back onto her face. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed back my chair and stood up. "I need some air," I muttered, walking toward the exit. The rooftop air was cool, crisp, and thankfully quiet. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the city lights, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. Was I overreacting? Maybe. But Haley's behavior wasn't just off tonight. It had been like this for weeks. The constant phone buzzing, the distant attitude, the way she seemed to light up for everyone else but barely glanced in my direction. And now this public roast session? My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Haley. "You okay? Don't take it so seriously. You know I love you, right?" I stared at the screen. The words felt fake, like she was checking a box rather than genuinely caring. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't reply. When I walked back inside, the vibe at the table felt different. Or maybe it was just me. Haley was deep in conversation with Rachel, her best friend and biggest enabler. Rachel kept glancing at me with this smug little smirk, like she knew something I didn't. Sean, of course, was still lounging in his chair, scrolling through his phone and occasionally laughing to himself. Every time he glanced up at Haley, There was this look, something between amusement and, I don't know, satisfaction. "Dylan, my man," one of the guys called out, waving me over. "Lighten up, grab another drink." I forced a weak smile and headed to the bar, ordering another whiskey and keeping my eyes on Haley. She was laughing loudly, tossing her hair like she didn't have a care in the world. And then I saw it. Rachel slid Haley's phone across the table. Haley picked it up, looked at the screen for a split second, and bit her lip to hide a smile. Then, just like before, she flipped the phone face down. That was it. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I walked back to the table, leaned in close and said, "We're leaving. Now." Haley looked up at me, her eyebrows arching. "What? Why?" "Because I said so," I replied, my voice sharp. Rachel, ever the instigator, chimed in. "Oh, come on, Dylan. Let Haley have some fun. She's been working so hard lately. She deserves a night out." My jaw tightened. "Haley," I said, locking eyes with her, "if you don't get up right now, I'm leaving without you." She rolled her eyes and grabbed her bag, tossing her napkin onto the table like it was some great inconvenience. "Fine, if it's that important to you." The walk to the car was suffocating. Haley crossed her arms and stared out the window the entire drive home, her silence louder than any argument. I didn't say a word either. My mind was racing, and for the first time, I wondered if I really wanted to know what was going on, or if it was already too late. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. By the time we got home, the silence between Haley and me was like a black hole, sucking all the air out of the car. She didn't slam the door when she got out. That would have required too much energy. Instead, she gave me this dramatic sigh, like she was the one who'd been wronged, and headed straight inside. I followed her in, tossing my keys on the counter and watching as she kicked off her heels and grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. "You want to tell me what that was all about?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. Haley looked at me like I'd just asked her to solve calculus. What was all about? The toast? The phone? Sean laughing like an idiot the whole time? Take your pick. She rolled her eyes and leaned against the counter. "Oh my God, Dylan. It was a joke. You're so dramatic." "You called me a Honda Civic, Haley," I said, my voice rising. "In front of everyone." Her lips curved into that smug little smile she'd perfected over the years. "Well, you are reliable." I felt my grip on the counter tighten. "This isn't about the damn toast. You've been acting different, distant. And don't even get me started on your phone buzzing all night." Haley crossed her arms, her smile disappearing. "I'm sorry if I don't want to spend every minute of my life coddling your ego, Dylan. Maybe you should take a look at yourself for once." That was it. I walked past her and into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My heart was racing, and my head felt like it was about to explode. But then I noticed her purse, carelessly tossed onto the bed, and sticking out of it, like a golden ticket, was her iPhone. I should have stopped myself. Really, I should have. But my mind was racing with all the little moments from the past few months. The late nights, the whispers between her and Rachel, the constant excuses to catch up with friends, and now Sean, smirking at me like he knew something I didn't. So, yeah. I grabbed the phone. The screen lit up with a message notification. My stomach dropped. "Sean, you were on fire tonight. Can't stop thinking about that dress." I didn't even hesitate. I unlocked her phone. Haley never bothered with a complicated passcode, and opened the messages. There it was, a thread between her and Sean that stretched back weeks, maybe months. I didn't even have to scroll far to see the kind of stuff that would turn any guy's stomach. "Sean, last night was amazing. I haven't stopped thinking about it." Haley, "Me too. Can't wait for the next time." My hands were shaking, but I kept scrolling, each message hitting harder than the last. There was no room for interpretation. No, maybe it's just friendly banter bullshit. This was exactly what it looked like. And then it got worse. I scrolled up to the beginning of their thread, back to the first message Sean had ever sent her. "Sean, hey, Rachel said I should reach out. She thinks you could use a distraction." Rachel. Of course she was involved. I set the phone down for a moment, trying to process what I'd just read. My head was spinning, and all I could feel was this overwhelming cocktail of anger, betrayal, and disgust. But I wasn't done. I opened her photos next. I know. At this point, I'd crossed every boundary there was. But something in me needed to see it all, to get the full picture. There were selfies of them together, tucked away in a hidden album. Pictures of them at places I didn't even recognize. One of them was from 2 weeks ago, taken at a little cafe downtown. The same day Haley had told me she was stuck in back-to-back meetings. And then there was the video. I didn't even press play. Just seeing the thumbnail, her leaning into him, laughing like he'd just said the funniest thing in the world, was enough. I then quickly copied and transferred to my phone just in case. I locked the phone, dropped it back onto the bed, and sat down, my head in my hands. This wasn't just some stupid fling. This was calculated, planned. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the effort she'd put into hiding it, the way she'd made me feel like I was the problem while she carried on behind my back. The bedroom door creaked open, and Haley stepped inside, her expression shifting from annoyance to suspicion the moment she saw me sitting there. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her eyes flicked to her phone, and I could see the panic starting to set in. I held up the phone, my hands shaking. "Care to explain this?" Her face hardened. "Were you going through my stuff? Are you seriously turning this around on me right now?" I snapped, standing up. "How long, Haley? How long has this been going on?" She crossed her arms, her lips curling into that infuriating smirk again. "Does it matter?" I felt something inside me snap. "Does it matter?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around with him, that smug, self-absorbed jackass, and you have the nerve to act like I'm the one in the wrong?" Haley stepped forward, her tone icy. "Oh, please, Dylan. Maybe if you weren't so busy being boring, I wouldn't have needed someone else to remind me what fun feels like." I grabbed her phone and, without thinking, threw it into the trash can by the bed. It landed with a satisfying thunk. Haley's eyes went wide, and for the first time all night, she looked genuinely angry. "What the hell, Dylan?" she shouted, rushing to the trash and fishing it out. "Are you insane?" "Not insane," I said, my voice low and steady. "Just done. Done with you, with him, with all of it. You threw our marriage in the trash, thought I'd return the favor." She looked at the phone, now scuffed and slightly dented, and then back at me. For a moment I thought she might cry, but instead she let out a bitter laugh. "Fine," she said, grabbing her bag. "You want me gone? I'll go. You'll see how much you miss me when you're sitting here alone, boring yourself to death." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, and just like that, she was gone. I sat back down on the bed, staring at the trash can where her phone had landed just moments before. My chest felt hollow, like someone had carved out everything inside me and left nothing but the echoes of her last words. I didn't know what was next, but one thing was clear. The life I thought I had was over. The house was eerily quiet after Haley left. Her perfume still lingered in the air, a sickly reminder that she'd been here moments ago, acting like I was the problem. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, which now had all the information I had copied safely hidden in it. The images, the texts, the sheer audacity of it all. It was like reliving a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point the silence became unbearable. My chest was tight, my mind racing with 1,000 questions, and not one of them had an answer. Why Sean? Why now? And how the hell had I been so blind to all of it? I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of this chaos. So I called Zach. Zach has been my best friend since we were kids, the kind of guy who always knew how to keep things grounded. He lived a couple of states over now, but distance never stopped us from keeping in touch. If there was one person who could cut through the noise in my head, it was him. "Dylan, what's up, man? You sound weird," Zach said as he picked up. "Haley's cheating," I blurted out. I didn't have the energy for small talk. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Shit," he said finally. You sure? Yeah, I said, my voice shaky. Texts, photos, the works. It's with Sean, of all people. Sean? That loudmouth? Jesus. I knew he was a tool, but this? Zach let out a low whistle. Man, I'm sorry, that's rough. I filled him in on the toast, the texts, the photos, all of it. Zach listened without interrupting, letting me unload every detail. When I finally stopped talking, he sighed. Look, I know what you're thinking, he said, but going after Sean? Not worth it. I wasn't going to, I started, but Zach cut me off. Don't lie to me, I know you, Dylan. You're probably picturing yourself knocking his teeth out right now. But listen to me, that's not the play. You don't want to be the guy who lets a scumbag like Sean drag you into something stupid. Handle this smart, not angry. He was right, of course, but knowing he was right didn't make the anger go away. What do I do then? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You do what she never expected, Zach said. You get everything in order. Lawyer up, protect yourself, and let her feel what it's like to lose for a change. The next day, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with fragments of Haley and Sean laughing together, mocking me. I dragged myself out of bed, made some coffee I couldn't taste, and sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. That's when I decided to call Rachel. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to get out of her, an explanation, an apology. Maybe I just wanted her to admit what she'd done, to own up to the fact that she'd handed Sean the keys to my marriage like it was some kind of sick joke. Rachel answered on the second ring, her tone bright and chipper, like nothing was wrong. Dylan, what's up? She said. I didn't waste time. What the hell were you thinking, Rachel? There was a pause. Excuse me? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I snapped. Sean, you introduced him to Haley. You encouraged this. Don't play dumb with me. Rachel let out a dramatic sigh, the kind she always used when she thought someone was being overly emotional. Look, Dylan, I don't know what you're accusing me of, but whatever's going on between you and Haley is not my business. Not your business? I said, my voice rising. You're the one who told Sean to reach out. I saw the text, Rachel. Don't even try to deny it. Okay, fine, she said, her voice suddenly sharp. Yeah, I told him to talk to her. So what? Haley was miserable, Dylan. She needed someone who could make her feel alive again. Her words hit like a slap. Alive again? Are you kidding me? She's married. To me. She could have come to me if she had a problem, but instead, she sneaks around with Sean and you just... What? Cheer her on? You don't get it, Rachel said, her tone condescending. Haley's been unhappy for years, Dylan. She felt trapped. And honestly, I don't blame her for wanting more than this. This? I repeated, stunned. What the hell does that mean? You're boring, Dylan, Rachel said, her words cutting like a knife. You're predictable. Haley wanted excitement and you, well, you're just you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So this is my fault now? She cheats on me. And somehow, I'm the bad guy. I'm not saying it's all your fault, Rachel said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. But maybe you should have seen this coming. That's when I lost it. You know what, Rachel? You're as bad as Sean. You act like you're above everyone, but all you do is stir the pot and watch the fallout. If Haley needed someone to remind her what alive feels like, maybe you should have pointed her to a therapist instead of the first douchebag you could find. Before she could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in days, I felt clear. That night I made 2 calls. The first was to a lawyer. I needed to get ahead of this, protect myself, and make sure Haley didn't walk away with more than she deserved. The second call was to Zach. She's not going to see this coming, I told him, pacing my living room. I've got the texts, the photos, everything. The lawyer said it's solid. She's going to lose. Zach let out a low chuckle. That's the Dylan I know. Smart. Strategic. Keep your head in the game, man. Don't let her pull you down to her level. Don't worry, I said, a grim smile forming. I'm just getting started. A few days after the Rachel call, I was starting to feel a little steadier. The lawyer Claire had already begun drafting paperwork, and I was consolidating everything I could to protect myself financially. I wasn't exactly fine, but I was functional. Then Haley texted me, "We need to talk." 4 words that made my blood boil. No apology, no explanation, just Haley being Haley, acting like she was still calling the shots. I didn't respond. Instead, I went home that night, locked the door, and braced myself for whatever hurricane she planned to unleash. Sure enough, around 8 p.m., Haley showed up. She didn't knock, she just walked in, like she still owned the place. I was sitting on the couch, going through emails, and didn't bother getting up. "Make yourself at home," I said dryly. She ignored the sarcasm and dropped her bag on the counter. "We need to talk," she said, crossing her arms like she was the one with grievances. "I'm not interested in whatever justification you've cooked up," I replied, not even looking at her. "God, you're so dramatic, Dylan," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This isn't about justifying anything. It's about, I don't know, closure." "Closure?" I repeated, finally looking at her. "You think I'm going to sit here and give you closure? After everything you've done?" Haley's jaw tightened. "You make it sound like I set your house on fire. People cheat, Dylan. It happens. Grow up." That was it. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. "You're unbelievable, you know that? You didn't just cheat. You humiliated me. You lied to my face, and now you're standing here acting like it's no big deal? What the hell is wrong with you?" Haley's expression didn't waver. If anything, she looked annoyed. "Oh, stop playing the victim. You think you were some perfect husband? You were boring, Dylan. Predictable. All you ever talked about was work, bills, and retirement plans. I needed something more." "So, naturally you turned to Sean?" I shot back. "A guy who probably spends more time picking out his Instagram captions than paying his rent?" Her lips curled into a smirk. "Sean made me feel alive. Something you haven't done in years." The room went silent. Her words hung in the air, venomous and calculated. I could feel my chest tightening, my heart pounding in my ears. "You're disgusting," I said, my voice cold. "And for the record, Sean doesn't make you feel alive. He makes you feel validated, which is probably the only thing you've ever cared about." Haley laughed, actually laughed, and shook her head. "Wow, you really think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? That holier-than-thou attitude is exactly why I stopped trying with you." "Stopped trying?" I barked, stepping closer. "Don't kid yourself, Haley. You never tried. You just pretended to be perfect while blaming everyone else for your miserable existence." Her face darkened, but she didn't back down. "At least I didn't waste my life being mediocre, Dylan. Face it, you're nothing special. Sean might not be perfect, but at least he's exciting." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, real exciting. Let's see how thrilling he is when he inevitably screws you over. You think you're special to him? You're just another fling, Haley, and when he moves on, you'll have nothing left." For the first time, I saw something crack in her, just for a moment. But she recovered quickly, her smirk returning like armor. "Better than being stuck with you." That was when I knew there was no saving this conversation, or anything else. "You're pathetic," I said quietly. "Get out." She tilted her head, as if considering whether to argue, then grabbed her bag. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when you realize how much you'll miss me." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching as she walked out the door, without so much as a backward glance. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. The next day, I told Claire everything. The texts, the photos, the financial discrepancies, every disgusting detail. She listened carefully, her pen flying across the notepad as I spoke. When I finished, she looked up and said, "She's going to fight back." "Let her," I said. "She doesn't deserve a dime." Claire smirked. "With what you've shown me, she's not going to get one either." That small victory was the first thing that made me feel remotely human in weeks. Later that evening, I got a text from Rachel. "You really need to apologize to Haley. She's been through a lot." I couldn't believe what I was reading. Apologize? To the woman who cheated on me and blamed me for it? I texted back, "She's been through a lot? Are you serious? She's the one who ruined this marriage, Rachel. Stay out of it." Her reply came almost instantly. "You're being petty, Dylan. If you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened." I stared at my phone, my anger bubbling over. How could someone be so delusional? Rachel wasn't just enabling Haley. She was actively rewriting history to make her the victim. I texted back, "Thanks for the unsolicited advice, Rachel. Maybe you should take a look at your own life before lecturing me on mine." I hit send, blocked her number, and threw my phone onto the couch. I was done playing nice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The anger, the frustration, the sheer absurdity of it all. It was like a storm raging in my head. But underneath it was something else. A strange, bitter clarity. Haley and Rachel weren't just toxic. They thrived on it. They lived for drama, for control, for the satisfaction of seeing others squirm. And for years, I'd been their perfect target. Not anymore. A few days later, I started hearing from mutual friends. The fallout from Haley's little confession had clearly spread through our social circle like wildfire because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, most of them from people I hadn't spoken to in months, but who suddenly cared deeply about my personal life. The first one I answered was from Amanda, one of the quieter ones in the group who, honestly, I never thought had much of an opinion about anything. "Dylan," she started, her voice cautious, like she was afraid I might explode on the other end of the line. I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" "Define okay," I replied, leaning back in my chair. There was a long pause. Then, in a rushed whisper, Amanda said, "Look, I just wanted you to know that a lot of us, well, we saw this coming." I sat up. "Saw what coming?" "Haley and Sean," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "It's been obvious for a while. The way they acted at parties, how they'd sneak off to talk alone. Honestly, Dylan, people were starting to think you knew and just didn't care." The words hit like a gut punch. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Another pause. "It's complicated," Amanda said finally. "Rachel kind of controlled the narrative. She made it seem like you were too distant, too busy with work, and that Haley, well, that she deserved someone who made her happy." I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Rachel. Again. Of course it was Rachel. "I'm sorry," Amanda added quickly, as if that would somehow soften the blow. "Thanks for letting me know," I said flatly, ending the call before she could say anything else. The next person I heard from was Kevin, one of Sean's buddies. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dude," Kevin started, laughing nervously, "I had no idea about you and Haley. Sean's been keeping things pretty quiet." "Quiet?" I repeated, my voice icy. "Is that what you call making out at parties and sneaking around behind my back?" "Look, man, I'm not saying what he did was cool," Kevin stammered. "But Sean, he's, just that guy. He doesn't think about the consequences. It's not personal." "Not personal?" I snapped. "He slept with my wife. How the hell is that not personal?" Kevin sighed. "I get it, man. I do. I'm just saying, Sean's not exactly a long-term thinker. This whole thing was probably just fun for him." Fun. The word echoed in my head, making my blood boil all over again. "Let me make something clear, Kevin," I said, my voice low and steady. "If Sean wants to keep having fun, he'd better stay far away from me, because the next time I see him, I won't just be talking." Kevin muttered something about keeping things cool and hung up, probably regretting the call altogether. By the end of the day, I'd pieced together a horrifying picture. Almost everyone in our group had known or suspected what Haley was doing, but no one said a damn thing. Worse, some of them had actively encouraged it. Rachel, of course, was the ringleader. She'd spun this story about how Haley was the victim of a loveless marriage, how she deserved to have a little fun, and how Sean was the perfect guy to give it to her. I wasn't just angry, I was disgusted. These weren't friends. They were vultures, circling around the carcass of my marriage and pretending they were doing it out of concern. That evening, I got another call, this time from Zach. "How's the war going?" he asked, his tone light but laced with genuine concern. "About as bad as you'd expect," I replied. "Turns out half our so-called friends were in on it." Zach let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's brutal. You want my advice?" "Always." "Cut them all loose," he said. "Rachel, Sean, the whole lot of them. They're toxic, man. You don't need that kind of energy in your life." "I'm already ahead of you," I said. "Blocked Rachel this morning. Kevin's probably on his way to the chopping block, too." "Good," Zach said. "Now focus on the important stuff. Your lawyer, your finances, and your peace of mind. The rest is just noise." As always, Zach had a way of cutting through the chaos and getting straight to the point. That night, I sat down with a notebook and made a list. On one side, I wrote down the names of people I could trust. On the other, I wrote the names of everyone who'd betrayed me. The second list was a hell of a lot longer than the first. But as I stared at it, something shifted. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry or hurt. I felt determined. This wasn't just about Haley or Sean or even Rachel anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, about cutting out the rot and starting fresh. A week passed, and I was starting to feel lighter. Cutting off Rachel and the rest of the backstabbers felt like removing a tumor I didn't know was there. My lawyer, Claire, had everything under control, and for the first time in ages, I actually slept through the night. Then Haley decided to waltz back into my life. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was halfway through reorganizing the garage when I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I ignored it. But then it came again, louder, more impatient. I opened the door, and there she was, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, wearing one of those outfits that screamed, "I'm doing great without you." "Dylan," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything, just leaned against the doorframe and folded my arms. Haley sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, I know things got messy, but we need to figure this out, for both our sakes." "Figure what out?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. She stepped closer, tilting her head like she was trying to appear sincere. "Come on, Dylan. We were married for years. We can't just throw that away." I laughed, an actual laugh, loud and bitter. "You're kidding, right? You threw it away the second you decided Sean was worth more than your vows." Her expression faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "I made a mistake, okay? I let things get out of hand. But that doesn't erase everything we had." "Haley," I said, shaking my head, "what we had was a marriage. What you turned it into was a joke, and I'm not interested in being the punchline anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being so damn stubborn. Do you even care about fixing this?" "Fixing this?" I repeated, incredulous. "You didn't come here to fix anything, Haley. You came here because you're losing. You thought Sean was your golden ticket, and now you're realizing he's just another guy who uses people and moves on. So spare me the crocodile tears." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. "Was I wrong?" I pressed. "Is Sean still in the picture, or has he already moved on to his next thrill?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. I stepped back and gestured toward the driveway. "You can go now, Haley. I think we're done here." But she didn't move. Instead, her face twisted into something uglier than I'd ever seen. "You know what, Dylan? You're pathetic. All this talk about vows and loyalty, but you never once made me feel alive. You think you're some noble victim, but you're just boring. Sean was right. You're the kind of guy women settle for, not the kind they want." Her words were meant to sting, and they did, but not in the way she expected. Because as she spat out her venom, all I could think was, thank God she's showing her true colors now, and not 5 years from now. I smiled, a calm, genuine smile that seemed to catch her off guard. "You're right, Haley," I said. "I am boring, I work hard, I pay my bills, and I don't need cheap thrills to feel alive. But you know what else I am? Free. Free of you, your lies, and whatever drama you'll bring to the next poor guy who falls for your act." Her jaw tightened, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Doubt it," I replied, closing the door in her face. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door and letting the silence sink in. It felt good, better than I expected, like I'd finally reclaimed something I didn't even know I'd lost. And then my phone buzzed. It was Zach. "How's it going?" he asked when I picked up. "Haley just showed up," I said. Zach groaned. "Let me guess. She gave you the whole, 'we can work this out' speech?" "Pretty much," I said, pacing the kitchen. "She's good at pretending. I'll give her that. But when I didn't bite, she showed her true colors. Told me I was boring and pathetic." Zach snorted. "Classic projection. You're not boring. She's just terrified of being alone." "Yeah, well, not my problem anymore," I said. "Damn right it's not," Zach said. "Now, what's the next move?" I thought about it for a moment. "Finish the divorce, rebuild my life, and maybe, just maybe, find a better class of friends." Zach laughed. "That's the spirit. And hey, don't forget to send me an invite when you're throwing your Haley-free life party." "You'll be the guest of honor," I said with a grin. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I felt free. Haley's words, as harsh as they were, didn't hurt the way they used to. Because I finally realized something. Her opinion didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the villain in her story. I was just her excuse. And now, I didn't need to play that role anymore. As I sat on the couch, sipping a beer and watching the sunset, I felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something better. It had been about a week since Haley's little comeback tour, and I was starting to settle into my new reality. The divorce paperwork was moving along smoothly. Claire made sure of that, and I'd cleaned out most of Haley's leftover junk from the house. Life was far from perfect, but at least it felt like I was finally in control. Then Sean decided to make his move. It started with a text. Unknown number. "Hey man, can we talk? It's Sean." Seeing his name pop up on my phone made my stomach churn. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend I never saw it. But the other part, the one still seething with unresolved anger, wanted to know what the hell he could possibly have to say. So I replied, "Me. What do you want?" His response came almost immediately. "Sean, I think we need to clear the air. Let me swing by. You home?" I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. But something in me wanted to see him face to face, to look him in the eye and hear whatever pathetic excuse he was about to throw at me. When he showed up, he looked exactly like the smug asshole I remembered. Designer sneakers, some kind of trendy jacket, and that same self-satisfied smirk he always wore. "Dylan," he said, holding up his hands like he was walking into enemy territory. "Thanks for agreeing to talk. I know things have been tense." "Tense?" I repeated, crossing my arms. "You slept with my wife, Sean. Tense doesn't even begin to cover it." He winced, like I'd just scuffed his sneakers. "Look, man, I get it. I screwed up. Big time. But it's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Then why don't you enlighten me?" Sean took a deep breath, like he was about to deliver some profound confession. "Haley came to me," he said, his voice low and dramatic. "She told me you were distant, that she felt trapped, like she couldn't breathe in your marriage. I didn't plan for anything to happen. It just did." "Wow," I said, clapping slowly. "What a beautiful love story. Let me guess. She told you I was boring, and you thought you'd be her knight in shining armor?" Sean shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't like that. I mean, yeah, she said some stuff about you, but I didn't take it seriously. She just needed someone to listen." "And you listened," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, "right into her bed." He held up his hands again, trying to look innocent. "I'm not proud of it, okay? But Haley, she's not who you think she is, man. She's a manipulator. She twists things, makes you feel like you're the problem. She did it to me, too. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. Was this guy seriously trying to make himself the victim? So let me get this straight, I said, stepping closer. You want me to feel sorry for you? Because Haley played you like a fiddle? Newsflash, Sean. You're not the first guy to fall for her act, but you are the one dumb enough to think you could get away with it. Sean's smirk faltered. Look, I'm just trying to be honest here. I wanted to apologize, all right? I never meant to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, I said, my voice cold. You embarrassed yourself. And for the record, whatever sob story Haley fed you, it doesn't excuse what you did. You knew she was married, Sean. You knew and you didn't care. Sean opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. You know what? I said, grabbing a basketball from the porch. Here's my advice. Stop chasing married women, and stop pretending you're some tragic hero who just couldn't help himself. Then, before I could stop myself, I hurled the basketball at him. It wasn't hard enough to hurt, but the satisfying thunk as it hit him square in the head was worth it. Dude! Sean yelped, stumbling back. What the hell? Get off my property, Sean, I said, pointing toward the street, before I decide to throw something heavier. Sean muttered something under his breath, but wisely backed away, hands raised in mock surrender. All right, I'm going. But for what it's worth, man, Haley's not worth all this anger. Let it go. I watched as he walked away, his shoulders hunched like a kid who'd just lost a playground fight. That night, I called Zach. You'll never guess who showed up at my house today, I said, cracking open a beer. Oh, let me guess, Zach said. Sean? Bingo. What did he want? To clear the air, I said, laughing bitterly. Apparently, Haley manipulated him too, and now he's a poor, misunderstood victim. Zach snorted. Classic Sean. Let me guess. He gave you some half-assed apology and acted like he didn't know what he was doing. Pretty much, I said. I told him to get lost, and I might have thrown a basketball at him. Zach burst out laughing. Man, I wish I'd been there to see that. Did it hit him? Right in his brazen face, I said, grinning. Perfect, Zach said. That's the energy you need to keep, man. Don't let these clowns get to you. You're better than all of them. For the first time in weeks, I felt like he was right. That night, as I sat on the couch with my beer, I replayed the conversation with Sean in my head. He'd tried to weasel his way out of responsibility, just like Haley had. But instead of feeling angry or bitter, I felt free. Sean and Haley were perfect for each other. Two selfish, clueless people who cared more about their own thrills than the damage they left behind. And me? I was done being part of their mess. A few days later, the divorce proceedings were in full swing. Claire was a godsend, methodically picking apart Haley's demands with a kind of cold efficiency that made me wish I'd met her under different circumstances. Haley, on the other hand, was putting on the performance of a lifetime, tears, excuses, and enough dramatic pauses to rival a soap opera actress. The first mediation meeting was the real showstopper. It was me, Claire, Haley, and Haley's lawyer, some overly polished guy named Bryce, who clearly thought he was the smartest person in the room. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. We were barely 5 minutes in when Haley launched into her spiel. I just feel like I've sacrificed so much for this marriage, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled out of nowhere. I gave up my career to support Dylan, and now he's trying to punish me for one mistake. Claire raised an eyebrow, her pen poised over her notepad. You sacrificed your career? She repeated, her tone neutral but razor-sharp. Can you clarify what you mean by that, Mrs. Hayes? Haley sniffled dramatically. I mean, I could have had a real career if I hadn't spent so much time taking care of Dylan and making our home a happy place. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Out loud. Haley shot me a glare that could have melted steel. Sorry, I said, holding up a hand. I just needed a second to process that. You sacrificed your career? Haley, you've never held a full-time job for more than 6 months. And let's not forget that our happy home was basically me cooking, cleaning, and paying all the bills while you were out with Rachel or, well, Sean. Bryce cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the room. "Mr. Hayes, there's no need to bring up extramarital issues at this time. We're here to discuss equitable division of assets." "Fine," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Let's talk assets. Haley, what exactly are you asking for?" Haley straightened up, her crocodile tears vanishing like magic. "I want half of everything," she said firmly. "The house, the savings, and spousal support for at least 5 years. Claire didn't flinch. "Mrs. Hayes, are you aware that my client has extensive documentation of your financial activity during the marriage, including the thousands of dollars spent on luxury items, vacations, and, let's call them extracurricular activities?" Haley's face turned a shade paler, but Bryce jumped in. "That's irrelevant. The court isn't here to moralize." "Maybe not," Claire said smoothly, "but it is here to ensure that financial fairness is upheld. And given Mrs. Hayes's spending habits and lack of financial contributions to the household, we believe her claim to half of the marital assets is excessive." The room was silent for a moment. Then Haley, clearly realizing she was losing ground, leaned forward and turned on the waterworks again. "I just don't understand why Dylan is being so vindictive," she said, her voice trembling. "We built a life together, and now he's trying to erase me from it." I bit my tongue, but Claire didn't. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, her tone icy, "this is not about erasing anyone. This is about ensuring that the party who contributed the majority of the financial stability in this marriage, my client, retains what is rightfully his. Your behavior during the marriage, documented as it is, speaks for itself." Haley's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine panic in her eyes. The second meeting was worse, for her anyway. Claire brought the receipts, literally. Photos of her with Sean, screenshots of their messages, bank statements showing the money she'd siphoned from our joint account for her little escapades. Haley's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Haley, for her part, tried to pivot into victim mode again. "This is so unfair," she cried. "Dylan knew I was unhappy, but he didn't care. He pushed me to this." "Let me get this straight," Claire said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're claiming that your unhappiness justifies fraud, infidelity, and financial exploitation? Is that correct?" Haley sputtered, but Bryce cut her off. "We'd like to propose a settlement," he said quickly. "Smart move," Claire said, her smile as sharp as a knife. By the time it was over, Haley walked away with far less than she'd hoped for. No house, no spousal support, and barely enough from the savings to cover her legal fees. As we left the mediation room, she caught up to me in the hallway. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat, her voice low and venomous. "But you'll never be happy, Dylan. You'll spend the rest of your life alone, stuck in your boring little world, while I move on and live my best life." I turned to her, completely calm. "Maybe I will be alone," I said. "But at least I'll be honest with myself. Can you say the same?" Her face twisted with fury, but before she could respond, I walked away. The divorce was officially finalized a week later. I got the house, kept my savings, and, most importantly, I got my life back. Haley had tried every trick in the book: tears, gaslighting, and even a last-ditch attempt to negotiate outside of the lawyers. But Claire's meticulous work left her with nothing to leverage. It was over. I thought I'd feel more triumphant. But honestly, I just felt relieved. The first thing I did was delete Haley from every corner of my life. Photos, contacts, even the social media profiles I'd barely used. It wasn't just about removing her presence, it was about reclaiming space for myself. Then I tackled the house. I went room by room, clearing out every trace of her. Her gaudy throw pillows, the overpriced candles she never lit, even the dumb little fridge magnets she insisted we buy on trips. By the time I was done, the house didn't feel like our house anymore. It felt like mine. That weekend, Zach came into town for a visit. He showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a toolkit, declaring it was time for a home improvement intervention. "Man, this place looks like a dentist's waiting room," he said, surveying the living room. No offense, but Haley's taste sucked. "None taken," I said, laughing. "What do you suggest?" Let's make this place scream you, Zach said. No more pastel throw blankets or fake plants. We're going full-on bachelor pad, leather couch, big-ass TV, and maybe a dartboard if you're feeling spicy. We spent the entire day ripping out old decor, rearranging furniture, and arguing over whether or not I needed a recliner. Spoiler, I bought one. By the time we were done, the living room looked completely different. Cozy, but not suffocating. It felt like a fresh start. That night we sat on the couch, beers in hand, watching a basketball game. So, Zach said, turning to me, what's the plan now? The plan? I asked. Yeah. You know, post Haley. What's next? I thought about it for a moment. I don't know, I admitted. For now, I just want to enjoy the quiet. No drama, no games, just peace. Good call, Zach said, clinking his beer against mine. But when you're ready, you know what you should do? What's that? Take a trip, he said. Get out of here, clear your head, go somewhere you've never been, and just be. I nodded, letting the idea sink in. A trip sounded like exactly what I needed. The following week, I found myself scrolling through travel blogs during lunch breaks. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a vague sense that I needed to go somewhere far away, somewhere Haley had never touched with her influence. Eventually, I landed on a small coastal town. It wasn't flashy or exotic, but it looked peaceful, and that was all I cared about. The trip was everything I hoped it would be. Long walks on the beach, quiet mornings with coffee and a book, and no one asking me about divorce or drama. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. One evening, I was sitting on a weathered bench overlooking the ocean, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The salty breeze tugged at my hair, and the waves crashed against the rocks in a soothing rhythm. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about Haley. I wasn't replaying old arguments or imagining what I should have said differently. I wasn't angry or bitter or even sad. I was just here, in this moment, alive and whole. When I got back home, something had shifted. The house felt different, less like a battleground and more like a sanctuary. I plunged headlong into work, started going to the gym regularly. I even made new acquaintances at the gym. Bit by bit, I was rebuilding myself. And the best part? I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. I was just living, and that was more than enough. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.